What's a harmless lie your parents told you that low-key messed you up? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. My dad was named after my grandmother's brother that had died shortly before he was born. I was always told this and it seemed perfectly harmless. Later in life, I learned that my grandmother had a sort of mental breakdown and thought my dad was her brother reincarnated. She not only named him the same name, but dressed him in his clothes and referred to him as her brother. In fact, her nickname for him my whole life was brother. It kind of fudged me up, and I never really saw my grandmother, or my dad for that matter, the same. I had so much more sympathy for my dad and some of his oddness. Can't be raised that way and not be a wee odd. Answer: the same thing happened to my cousin, son of my uncle. He was born shortly after his uncle, brother of his mother, drowned. But this time it was his grandparents that thought he was the reincarnation of their son. They actually raised him as if he was their son and literally took him away from his mother. He also carries their name instead of my uncle's surname and everything. He is now in his 50s and estranged from our side of the family, but also from his own kids. He physically abused his wife, and I feel like he thinks the world kind of evolves around him. Story 2. Mr. Yuck lives in the cabinet under the kitchen sink, and if we were to ever open the cabinet, he would eat us. I was terrified of that cabinet for years. Eventually, I realized the household cleaners were all kept under the sink, hence Mr. Yuck to keep us away and safe, I'll edit. I had no idea it was a thing with a commercial and stickers. I just assumed my parents made it up themselves. While what Reddit comments can teach you LOL. Story 3. If you vacuum over the cord to the vacuum, you will be electrocuted to passing, and the house will burn down. Great. Now vacuuming low-key scares me. Story 4. Not parent, but my older brother said he saw the Easter Bunny come in to drop off the baskets and described him as a 7-foot rabbit who walked on 2 feet upright and his fur was purple, and that each step he took had no sound. It terrified me. Answer: 1 year for Easter, my mom was gone in the hospital for cancer treatments, so my dad had to be the Easter Bunny. He didn't know what to do exactly with the baskets, so he decided to put them in our rooms in the dark. He dropped off my sisters just fine, but then in my room he decided to put it on my little table. He swears he could see it easily because of the barn light shining in. Well, what he couldn't see was the little chair that went with the little table in front of it. He tripped, nearly fell all the way down, clearly woke me up. He has a sense to put down the basket, and bless his heart he tried to play it off. I heard a noise in here. It was the Easter Bunny. I can't believe it. He went on and on how he'd even forgotten it was Easter, with everything going on, blah, blah, blah. What he didn't think about, I guess, is that I was one messed up kid, always afraid someone or something was in my room. He had to give up my dang nightlight for Lent, so it'd already been suffering. It didn't matter that it was the Easter Bunny. My brain's takeaway was, see, something was in your room and your hyper-vigilance missed it. I slept on the floor of my dad's room for like a straight month. And that's not like the first time I did. I did that a lot. And my parents had been constantly trying to break me of that and were mad about it. And this made it so much worse. My poor dad. He was trying so hard. Story 5. My dad saying he could lift a car with 10 people in it. Also that he was secretly the Hulk, but never transformed BC. That he was really good at controlling his anger. I remember the next day bragging about it to kids in my class and debating them the entire day about how it's true and my dad wouldn't lie. Answer: my grandpa was a great storyteller, and my uncle, one of his kids, was incredibly gullible. He went to kindergarten and told all his classmates that his father was a pirate, a la Pirates of the Caribbean, and even got into a scuffle on the playground over it. Led to some awkward parent-teacher conferences. For the record, he was not a pirate. He worked a desk job in the Air Force. Very un-pirate-like. Story 6. Had a bad habit of chewing on my nails when I was in the 6th grade. Mom told me a story about a girl who chewed on her nails and accidentally swallowed a small piece. The nail continued to grow in her stomach until it poked through her stomach and cut her open from the inside, and she had to have surgery. Never chewed on my nails after that. Answer: kids eat weird stuff. Old AF woman medic here. ER. Checked in a couple with their daughter 6. She complained of a stomach ache. Before leaving, the mom went to check on her daughter in the bathroom and saw blood in the bowl. Straight to the ER. The doc listened to her stomach and asked if she swallowed something she shouldn't have. In all her 6-year-old innocence, no. X-rays, untold pieces of chewed-up glass, bits of filament, immediate surgery. After removing innumerable crunched pieces, they measured the bulk, and it was just under the size of a ping-pong ball. Or chart explanation. It appears patient has hyalophagiapica tendencies. Then went on to detail perforations. Parents were horrified. Kids eat weird stuff. Story 7. My mom told me when I was maybe 9 that she would just know when I lost my virginity, and it made me paranoid as hell about her being able to sense things about me without me telling her. Answer. Mine said something similar, but took it a step further and said she had hidden cameras all over the house and knew everything I ever did. Millennial here, so it wasn't totally out of the question that she could have little spy cams. It made me insanely paranoid and really good. And finding hidden things because, you bet your jerk, I searched all around and never found a single camera. Story 8. I was apparently not good at drying off after showers as a child. My mom told me that not drying between my toes could lead to gangrene. She just wanted to get me to dry off more thoroughly, but I was terrified of my toes getting infected and falling off for way too many years. Story 9. Hey, Mom. When I was maybe 5 or 6, I remember my parents talking about something and my mom saying, "Why don't you go with your girlfriend?" I thought this was funny, and so I turned to my dad, laughed, and said, "Yeah, go with your girlfriend." Well, when I was 11 or 12, my dad told me he cheated on my mom when I was 2. The woman became pregnant, and turns out I have a half-brother. Eat it. I forgot to add that when my mom was feeling jealous or angry, that's when my mom would tell my dad to go with his GF, aka the woman he cheated on my mom with. Answer. Jesus, dude, I had the same experience. My parents would argue a lot throughout my childhood. Seems likely that I was also at 5 to 6. And I often heard things like, "Why don't you go stay with your slapper girlfriend? And you've had intimacy with her." I was young, I didn't understand, but I could tell my dad had done something bad and didn't dare to involve myself or ask questions at the time. Probably because I could see it was an upsetting subject for my mother. Their relationship improved over the years. They fought less, although perhaps it'd be more of a well-adjusted person today if there hadn't been so much conflict during my formative early childhood. I think deep down, fights like these, and especially my mother's words, stuck with me. Therefore, I wasn't as surprised as I could have been when I was 18, and my half-sister, aged 17 and born from his affair, reached out to me. And my little, full brother was 16, which makes for a very fudge-up timeline. I would have been only a few months old baby when she was conceived. I shouldn't have asked my dad about her. It's not a subject we're allowed to talk about now. He said I would upset my mother. Story 10. That if I ate a hot dog, I would die. My dad didn't want me to choke and die, so he just told me I was terribly allergic. It wasn't a big deal until I went to my first sleepover and ate a hot dog and told my friend I was happy it was going to end like this, and that I had a lot of fun on my last day. I tried to commit tragic end via hot dog and scared the shoot out of my friend and her entire family. I was probably 6 or 7. Story 11. My grandma went blind around when I was born. My dad used to tell me it was because she looked at me. Story 12. When you hear the music playing on the ice cream truck, that means they are all out of ice cream. Darn you, Mom. Story 13. Good girls don't want to marry. And then she lists off whatever the current issue was to try to make me behave. Good girls don't want to marry guys who spend all their money on bicycles, who don't put dishes in the dishwasher, who don't have a career plan by 16, who don't go to church, who talk to girls at the park, who don't shower before every meal, who quit jobs for better jobs, etc. She was a very Christian woman, trying to raise me right from a young age. I think I was 11 when the good girl guilt started. I grew up really insecure, convinced I was unlovable, and that any girl I liked would never like me back. Looking back, she had points. Personal hygiene is important, but to tell your son he's unlovable because he came in for lunch after working all hot summer day in the garden and stunk is wrong. It's important to learn how to coexist with a woman in the same habitation, but telling him he'll never get married if he doesn't perfectly follow her changing kitchen rules is dumb. It's important to teach fidelity. Shaming a boy for talking to classmates is harmful. And so on. Answer. I was in the women's bathroom at a baseball game, and I heard a mom that was outside a stall talking her kid through using the bathroom alone. She said, "Just remember, girls love a clean male body part." The kid was like 5 and didn't appear to be needing help, but he's definitely old enough to remember that if she's saying it at full volume in an MLB stadium bathroom. Story 14. If Mom had gone out for the day and I was looking for her around the house, my dad used to tell me she'd had enough of us and gone to America to live with her brother. Wrecked my head. Story 15. My grandpa made jokes about my grandma taking a ride on her broom, which lead to impressionable young me being accused of witchcraft and almost being expelled from private school because I believed him. Story 16. One day I walked home tipsy from a friend's house and apparently couldn't manage to unlock the door to the house and started puking and passed out on the porch. For years, she told me she found me on the porch with a birthday cake on my lap. Later in life, she told me she made that last part up, but for years, I didn't go to a couple stores that were on the route home because I was scared I'd stolen a cake. Story 17. After my parents split up, my mom came to visit. We visited her at our uncle's house, and at one point, my dad went out for cigarettes and didn't come back. For 20 years, I thought my dad had abandoned us and didn't come looking for us. Turns out our mom kidnapped us, and when our dad got back, our uncle met him at the door with a shotgun and told him to leave. Story 18. The cops could come and take me to juvie for any household offense. Messy room, not doing dishes, not watering plants. Mom would hop on the phone and ask for the chief, so I'd scramble off to get the work done. When I got older and realized she was full of it, she actually called the cops to report I was on substances. Cops correctly dismissed her. Answer, oh my gosh, man. I'm so sorry I laughed at this, but that's so crazy, calling the cops to report dirty dishes? On the flip side, my dad was a cop. And with 3 brothers, we were continually threatened with having to go down to the station and take a lie detector test to figure out who should have fessed up to whatever. Nobody's going to fess up about spilling pop in the garage. Guess we're heading down to the station. And of course, someone would immediately confess because the punishment was going to be so much worse afterward if the lie detector caught us. Not really a bad memory. It was pretty effective, really. Can't blame them. Story 19. Parents would go grocery shopping until very late a couple times a week, and our house mysteriously had a lot of problems with power outages. Also, it was weird that aunts and uncles used to send us nothing for birthdays and Christmas, and then suddenly we would get gift cards to specific stores we liked. They were gambling money they couldn't afford to spend at casinos, and then selecting certain bills every month to not pay. Stole my sister's education fund left by her bio dad, which she didn't know existed until she was applying for uni. Constantly stole cash from our Christmas and birthday cards sent to us from relatives and then swapped the cards into new envelopes so we didn't know there was ever cash. Didn't try some fresh fruits like pineapple until adulthood because they didn't want them to be partied too hard on us, as that's money that could be spent at the casino. Some people don't realize that gambling addictions can be as shoot as other addictions, man. Story 20. My mom, not from Australia originally, so maybe this was an honest mistake, told me everything was venomous, which made me terrified of the beach. Stonefish, snails in the garden, a slug, etc. She also told me some German myths that fudged me up like I was terrified of being near the Christmas tree on Christmas Eve, like absolutely petrified. Basically German children's stories in general. I'm over it all now, but it messed me up as a kid, lol. Answer, have you heard about Sam Ballard, the Aussie guy who ate a slug on a dare, caught rat lungworm, developed eosinophilic meningitis, and spent 420 days in a coma, which resulted in an acquired brain injury causing him to require 247 nursing, as his whole body was paralyzed and he was unable to do anything for himself, and who then died 8 years later. Story 21. My mom decided I was allergic to milk. I was not. Long story, but I lived with, Atlee, my entire childhood lie, maybe a bit strong, but crazy as bullshit, yes. Answer, did she ever explain anything that happened to make her believe that? My son has had some pretty severe reactions to milk that weren't deadly, but warranted some trips to the doctor's office quite a few times, so I try to keep it at a minimum with him, or only get one or other types of milk. He loves milk. The older he's gotten, the more manageable it has seemed. Story 22. When I was 6, my dad told me that aliens came down to Earth using meteor showers as cover, so they aren't noticed on radar. I lived in the suburbs in Arizona, which has lots of cloudless skies and dark sky initiatives. Laws designed to reduce light pollution. You basically can't not see meteor showers when they're happening, which is pretty regularly. That's the start of my insomnia. Story 23. When I was 5, I had several cavities that needed to be filled. Our family dentist allowed my mom to come back in the room with me, but then she said she had to go get a magazine and left, and didn't come back. Still mad at mom for that, may she rip. I haven't forgotten it. 63 years later. Story 24. Watch the news with my dad. The newsreader made a mistake. I said to my dad, what happens to the newsreader now he's made a mistake? Afterwards, my dad said they'll take him out the back and shoot him. I was about 7, thought it was very harsh, but accepted it. Story 25. If I plucked my nipple hairs, I'd get breast cancer, fudge you, mom. I was a fuzzy girl and was terrified of getting grandma's breast cancer, but I got bullied by all my boyfriends. Story 26. Dad convinced me as a young child, like 4 or 5, that if you eat only one of 2 Reese's cups and then put the pack in the freezer, you'll get a second cup fresh pack. He spent a lot of extra money keeping that lie up for a bit until I got sick of Reese's cups and didn't eat one for nearly 20 years. Story 27. They told me my tortoise that I loved at 5 years old was stolen by a man who collected reptiles. They sold her. They sold her while I was sleeping and let me believe that a man had stolen her from my garden. Story 28. Halloween is evil. I missed out on Halloween for most of my life because they're so close-minded. But thanks to them, I have a permanent Halloween fixation. Answer, mine's not as bad, but my parents disliked TV for the most part. We were allowed to watch, but had lots of limits for how much and what we could watch. Now I've spent the last 14 years working in TV. Showed them. JK, they've been very supportive of my career and came to me to the Emmys when I got nominated. But the call for the forbidden fruit of childhood is real. Story 29. My parents would daily inform me that they were going to take me back to the hospital and trade me in for a better kid. But don't worry, guys. It was just a joke and definitely didn't leave any lasting damage. Story 30. My mom told me I was part black to avoid me growing up racist. I'm a ginger. I got a lot of pushback in school due to sharing said fact. Oh boy, I was confident. Story 31. We beat you because we love you. I used to hide my black and blue bruises under my school uniform at 8 years old. Perfect. Trauma and affection in one neat package. What a combo. Answer. Sorry you went through that. Parents can be cunts. Mine used to beat me because my eczema was bad. Then if it wasn't, my stepdad would really like on the stress and threats until it was, then beat me. She died last year. My sister took 2 weeks to tell me, although I found out on the day thanks to a text message from someone telling me to check my uncle's Facebook wall. And when she started with 2 weeks ago, our beloved mother passed away, I wondered if there was another woman out there called Mum. I didn't know about LOL. Story 32. Small one, but that it was illegal to turn the overhead light on in the car at night when someone was driving. To this day, I get anxious when someone turns it on. And to this day, my mom swears she never told me that LOL. Story 33. My parents told me Jewish people don't own dogs and just let me and my brother assume it was some kind of strict religious rule so we wouldn't keep asking for one. As such, long after I realized that was a lie, I still kind of avoided dogs and didn't get one until I was in my 40s, at which point I realized that dogs are the greatest thing ever and that I'd partied too hard many years not having one in my life. I don't know if that counts as being messed up, but it definitely makes me sad because I missed out on a lot of awesome years with dogs. Story 34. Knowing my dad drowned when I was a child sucked. Hearing that he was taken down as an adult was pretty fudge rough. Kinda wish you just kept that to yourself. Story 35. It didn't mess up with me. It was just funny, and I still think about it today. One day, my dad's car was broken, and I asked him what happened. He said, "Do you see how the clouds are today? So every time they look like this, the cars won't work." And not for a second, I thought about the other cars coming and going on the street in front of our house. My dad was funny and creative. God rest his soul. P.S. I don't know if we'll be able to describe the clouds, but it is when they are all fluffy, covering the whole sky and looking like a field of clouds. Story 36. My whole childhood, my dad was on a 50-year plan, meaning he was going to die at 50. Every birthday of his, I was stressed half out. Story 37. Here's a fun one. When I came of age, my mom sat me down to tell me that she could ovulate on demand like a goat. She was studied by doctors, and it was genetic, so I probably could too. Just came to learn goats don't even ovulate on demand. One way of scaring kids into safe intimacy, I guess. Edited for clarity. Story 38. Girls only hit you because they like you. Also, don't react when the bullies pick on you. They're only looking for a reaction. Story 39. If I opened my eyes once on Christmas Eve night, Santa Claus would claw my face off with his Santa Claus. Story 40. As a kid, I had a small allowance of $5 every week. The only thing I bought for myself was a video game once or twice a year. So I saved most of that money, but when my parents noticed how much I saved, they always took it away. At first, I believed they were saving it for later, but eventually knew better. Not sure what kind of lesson they wanted to teach me, but I learned to burn the cash as soon as I got it, or it'll be taken away. It really messed me up once I became independent. Story 41. My parents told me that I had to be careful hanging up pictures on the wall because if I misjudged the studs, I would hit an electrical wire and die. I didn't dare hang up a picture on a wall until I was 30. And my aunt told me my parents told me that to stop me from hanging up stupid emo shoot on my walls in high school. Story 42. I would ask my father when I was young, "Dad, what day is it?" He would say, insert day, as long as it doesn't rain. So when I would go to school when it rained, I would tell the kids and the teachers, oops, it's the next day now. X. It's Monday, but if it rains now, it's Tuesday. Story 43. They would make up names for certain fruits and teach them to us as their real names. It was their little inside joke that they made me and my sister a part of, without telling us it was a joke. So imagine the looks I got at school when I saw a friend eating a peach and I said, I like Kikaros too. Story 44. My mother grew up without hers because her mother died when she was only 4 years old. We often visited her maternal uncle. I remember asking my mother when I was little whether my grandmother had any other siblings, since I only knew that one uncle. She said no. Anyway, 20 years later, this old woman knocks on our door and tells me she is my mother's aunt. And I said, my mother doesn't have any aunts, only uncles on both sides, and closed the door at her face. Then another knock on the door. Me, being already annoyed, opened the door again. Only this time, my uncle stood next to that old lady. Turns out, my mother often didn't really listen when I asked her stuff, and she, in fact, had 3 aunts on her mother's side of the family. Story 45. My dad always told me I had an older brother named Bill who had misbehaved and ended up buried in the backyard. Only much, much later did I realize just how fudge up that is, especially in context of the very real people who did just that. Story 46. My dad told me 2 bad ones about my teeth. Flossing should take at least 5 minutes. If you aren't going to spend that long, don't bother. As a result, I never flossed, have confirmed that's nonsense by multiple hygienists and dentists. Flossing is pretty quick. Took years to get into the habit of flossing. You don't need to brush the bite surfaces of your teeth. Just get the rest thoroughly, and they'll be fine. Guess where I got my only cavity and cavity watch? I brush the bite surface now. Story 47. You can achieve anything if you work hard enough. They left out luck, opportunity, good physical and mental health. Story 48. Not a parent, but my pop told me when I was a kid that if I swallowed any toothpaste while brushing my teeth, that teeth would grow in my stomach and eat me from the inside out. I'm 29, and I still can eat anything mint-flavored because it makes me nauseous. Story 49. I was terrified of the monster under the bed in my closet when I was a kid. So in desperation, one night, my mom took one of the toy wands from my dress-up box and said it was a monster detector and it would beep really loud if it found one. Helped me sleep when she waved it around and it didn't beep, but I had a genuine fear of loud noises, ESP fire alarms at school, until high school, my poor mom. Story 50. My mom told me that I was not allowed to play by the local river because it had snakes in it. It worked. I never dared to play there, but the days when mom and dad went swimming, there were the worst. I remember crying once because I was worried sick mom and dad would get eaten by the snakes. Story 51. That I couldn't move out because they would lose the house. I needed to pitch in for bills. Ends up my mom just wanted to buy the kids at her church gifts every month. She also convinced me that I was too fat to pursue a career in entertainment. Story 52. My mother told me that eating until you feel very full stretched your stomach out, which is why you got that feeling. She said that if you kept doing that, you would get fatter and fatter as you continued to stretch your stomach out. I was terrified to even feel slightly full as a kid adolescent and ate very small meals. Ended up badly anorexic. I'm almost 38 and still have an unhealthy relationship with food. Answer. Overeating actually did this to my stomach. I was grossly overweight about 10 years ago, to the point where I had the gastric sleeve weight loss surgery. When I woke up, the doctor told me that my stomach was 23Ds larger than the average human stomach because I ate so much and so fast. 4 racks of ribs at an all-you-can-eat joint I used to frequent was not uncommon for me at the time. I had such an unhealthy relationship with food, it caused me to do this. Stretch my stomach out and have to have the surgery. Now I'm down 110 pounds and, other than a bum knee, feel better than I did at 54 than I did at 44. Ewa. Story 53. My mother told me it was illegal to change lanes on bridges because she disliked bridges. I believed her until I was like 28. There were 3 truths in life: passing, taxes, and it's illegal to change lanes on a bridge. Imagine my surprise when I learned it was all a lie. Upshot is that whenever I see a tall bridge, well, think of my mom. Story 54. If I go too far from home, a large bald man will throw me into the back of his van and kidnap me. I don't trust bald men. Story 55. My grandparents would tell us that the silos were filled with bad children when we would drive by. They would make us shh so we could hear them crying. LMAO. Story 56. When I was like 6, I decided to figure out how much money we had. I asked my dad if we had $100 and he said yes. I asked about $200 and he said yes. I asked up to 500 and the answer was yes. Then I asked 600 and he said I don't know because I was being annoying. For the next roughly 4 years, I thought we were on the edge of 600. Like paycheck by paycheck, we might have $600 in the bank. Every time I heard of something costing more than that, I was like, that's more than my entire family has. Holy shoot. Story 57. Mom used to make up a story to fish for lies. Hey, your friend's mom called and said you've been drinking with her daughter. This is a vague example, but my mom was an expert level manipulator, and it just made me lie all the time about everything to her, so she won't have any details to fish with. Story 58. Men aren't mature until they're at least 30. Applauded me for dating a 25-yo at 17. Learned a little too late that people mature at different rates, and the people that want to date someone so much younger than them aren't mature at all. Story 59. Eat all your food. Finish your plate. There are starving kids in Africa that would love to have that to eat. Took me 43 years to realize that's not a good reason to keep eating when you're full. Story 60. Christ was going to return any day, and if I had any sin on my heart, I would be left behind and actively hunted by evil PPL and was told in excruciating detail what would happen if I was caught. Great intro to anxiety as a 5-year-old. Story 61. Didn't mess me up, but my aunt died in her early 20s when I was around 7 or 8. They told me she got cancer, but my grandma always said it was because she drank Coca-Cola for breakfast. Turns out she was an addict and shared needles. She died of AIDS. Story 62. My parents lied to me for years about the fact that I'm autistic. When I finally got diagnosed because I literally couldn't function unsupported anymore, my mom apologized for never taking the steps to confirm what she knew was true and for any damage she caused. My dad is still in denial and makes such a big deal about making sure I never have the absolute audacity to be my authentic, unmasked self around him that he tried to ban me from stimming around him. He thinks it's a trend and that my friends are somehow behind it because he doesn't like them, and refuses to listen to my mom, who studied psychology in college, that it is in fact real and that this is in fact the way I've always been. Story 63. I was with my mom and we were visiting her sister after she had her first child. I was a kid and remember going into town and seeing Polaroids of people in masks taped to a cafe window. One caught my eye as it looked real. Blended, matching skin tones. It was one of those cartoonish old man masks. My mom said these were the people who kept making faces and rolling their eyes. Their faces got stuck like the person with the realistic looking mask. I was 7 and it gave me nightmare the rest of the trip. Story 64. My dad told me about Freud and his ideas on forbidden topic when I was far too young. It really fudged with my ability to show affection for family members. I was terrified I might do something that would make them think I was intimacy interested. Story 65. My parents told me nacho cheese and fries would give me cancer. They would eat them though because they were old and would die soon anyway. Turns out they wanted my cheese and fries. Story 66. That my hamster died of old age. She let it slip a couple years ago that it was actually the cat, and my heart broke. Story 67. My parents told me that the reason why they had me was because my brother wanted a little sister. If that was the whole thing, and it'd be cute. But the whole thing is that first he wanted a dog, but later wanted a sister as well. So when parents made him choose that he can't have both, he chose a sister. They really tried to play it off as me being a late Christmas gift from my brother. I have no idea how they thought it was a cute or funny story. It made me feel like an object from my entire childhood. My birth was a selfish wish of a person who later wasn't even there for me in my childhood. Since then, I've heard some retellings of this story from my mom. She was trying to straight it out that I wasn't a gift, that they genuinely wanted me, but waited for my brother to accept my dad as his new dad, yada, yada, yada. I don't believe them, or maybe I just don't know what to believe. Even if they actually wanted me, it doesn't change that. This funny story damaged my view on my existence. Answer, and that's the key of it. I'm proud of you for recognizing it. It can be hard to identify that it's not about what you said or meant, but it's about how the other person heard and felt about it. I told my wife today, the dishwasher keeps being full because 14 of these dishes need to be hand washed due to their last dishwasher run drying food bits onto them. She heard, even though she are doing the dishes twice a day, I can do them better. A quick discussion of our feelings and an apology, and we're right as rain. Story 68. My father would tell me the house had burnt down when he picked me up from martial arts or swim practice, and would stone-faced lie about it and tell me all the things we would have to do in temporary housing. He'd deliberately drive the long way home if I didn't believe it, until I'd finally break and start crying. Story 69. Maybe less messed up than some of these, but I had a bad dentist appointment once as a kid, and ran out. I really liked the dentist, but he didn't give enough numbing that one time. Anyway, was supposed to see him again a couple weeks later, but then my mom said he doesn't want to see me again because of what I did. I actually found out more than 10 years later that he fudge died a few days after my appointment, and that's why I couldn't see him again. So instead of teaching me about passing, she gave me awful social anxiety. Story 70. Not exactly a lie, but my father once said something that unintentionally fudged me up. When I was a kid, sometimes my toenails would grow into my skin and cause an infection. My parents would take me to the local health center where a doctor removed the nail and they prescribed antibiotics. This happened 3 or 4 times, maybe more, and it was always painful. When I was around 8 years old, I got another one, but this time I didn't tell my parents because I didn't want to go through that painful process again. A few days later, the topic came up one night, and my dad just casually mentioned that people who got infections and didn't treat them properly would get gangrene and eventually die. I didn't say anything. I just went to bed and cried in secret, thinking that it was too late for me. I was too ashamed to admit I had hidden it from my parents and believed that the infection had already advanced beyond cure, so I accepted the fact that I would die in the following days. Every day for the next couple of months or so, I could think of nothing else, still believing that my passing was imminent and inevitable, even though my toe had healed on its own. Eventually, I just kind of forgot about it, but as it is obvious, it fudged me up, and I feel that it forever shaped my psyche in a negative way. Parents, please be clear when talking to your kids and make sure they feel they can talk to you about anything without judgment. Story 71. We had a few dogs growing up. My dad's favorite was a Boston Terrier named Buster. He was such a good boy. When my parents split up, my dad couldn't take Buster or any pets. They stayed with us. It was a toxic split, and my mother disliked everything about my dad, including his dog. We had all the dogs, and she decided to give Buster away. It was to a nice family, but the dog came back twice, maybe more. When I think about it now, it breaks my heart. Well, I don't know if the family decided to stop trying or what transpired, but one day he was gone again. She told me a Hollywood producer saw him one day and wanted to take him to Hollywood to be in commercials. I found out later she had him put to sleep. Answer, I had a Boston Terrier named Buster too. In a reverse of the prompt, Buster snapped at my mom once and she got nervous about him being near toddler me. They told us he went to go live on a farm and he had lots of animal friends. I believed that, but then got older and I was like, wow, they put him down and didn't tell us. But I called my mom out on this way later and she said no. He went to go live with family friend on his farm, but he lived over an hour from us, so we never really had a chance to see him again. I'm not sure how he passed, but I hope he enjoyed his time there. I'm sorry about your Buster. Dogs are so precious and it's heartbreaking when they leave. Story 72. I quit sports my senior year of high school. I enjoyed sports as a kid and now as an adult, but I wasn't that good. I was just big. I preferred to get a job and save money for a car. My dad, a former small-town jock, threw an absolute hissy fit and said that I would be unemployable if I didn't play sports, that I'd be missing a key part of my resume as an adult, and that if people saw that I didn't play sports my senior year, they would throw my resume in the trash. It actually did mess me up for a bit, and my relationship with my dad felt different that year. Yeah, I'm 34 and am a director of software engineering now at an IT company. I think I did okay. Not a single person has asked me about my high school sports accolades. I get along with my dad now, but once in a while, it's fun to bring up. I make sure to let him know when I get resumes that include whether or not someone played sports. Story 73. My mom lied that she lost 2 of her cousins to drowning at the beach to prevent my brothers and me from going near pools or the sea. Till today, I can't swim because I missed the chance in my youth. Answer. I grew up a 5-minute walk from the beach. However, when I was 3, I drowned in a family friend's pool, and after that, I developed a crippling fear of drowning. I couldn't even wash my face under the shower until I was 31. I had to use a wet cloth to wash it. I didn't learn how to swim until I was 35 and living in the Australian outback at the local pool. It took loads of therapy, plus my husband doing so much to help me in order to get over that fear. The best part was on the day my husband, his best friend, and I went to the local pool so I could learn to swim, the pool wasn't super busy because it was 46.5 C1 15.7 F. But there was a big group of Barkinji, the local indigenous nation, boys who were between 10 to 15 years old, and when they overheard that I was learning to swim, they joined the 3 of us and cheered me on every time I tried something new. When I worked up the courage to dive into the deep end from the blocks at the edge, They all waited for me in the shallower end. And when I jumped and then came up from under the water, they were all cheering me. And when I swam up to them, they all started high-fiving me and hugging me. So you are never too old to learn. Story 74. When I was 13, my cat went missing. She had been gone for about a month, and while driving home one day, my mom saw a dead cat in the road and gasped. She sent my stepdad to go check. When I saw him walk back through my windows, he was carrying a lifeless black cat. I broke down sobbing. My mom came in and reassured me that it wasn't my cat, that it had no white on it. My cat had a small white patch on her belly, that my stepdad was just burying this cat out of respect. She told me every now and then she'd see her in the backyard. She just moved out to live with the deer. To be fair, I had spotted a black cat in our yard every now and then after her passing, but can you tell who a black cat is from that far away? When I was 21, I asked her if I could dig up the random cat, morbid I know, because I really wanted a cat skull to display. She finally informed me that it was indeed my cat, and she had lied to me to protect me. Mind you, my dad had died less than a year before that, and she took me to see his last breaths on hospice without informing me that he was comatose and passing rattling. I had no clue I was about to watch a person die. Where was the protection then? Story 75. That people will get more accepting when I got older. I'm in my late 30s, so haven't seen it happen. In their defense, I was the weird kid, and they were trying to make me feel better about getting bullied at school. I kind of wish they'd gone with, some people just suck and you don't need them to like or accept you. Story 76. My grandpa went to another country to help the country with English and building houses. Turns out he went to prison for 10 years for beating a PD file that hurt a neighborhood kid. Big ups on my grandpa, now I'm an adult, but really damaged my relationship with him growing up, because I thought he left us to have fun with other families, etc. Also was a bit scared of him when he came back, released from prison, because he had a lot more tattoos and was a meaner person. Story 77. I thought my father was the man who died when I was 3. Found out at 32 that my real father is alive and well, and I have 7 brothers and sisters. Story 78. Still pretty mad. Mom used to say it was illegal for any lights to be on inside the car while moving. LOL. Now some cars come equipped with disco parties, starlight, giant touchscreens, etc. LOL. Story 79. IDK, but I have a friend who convinced her children that beans were bird shoot, and now they won't eat beans. No clue why she did that. Was a pretty dumbass move. Story 80. Wasn't my parent, but a teacher. She told me that crows and starlings like sparkly things, and that if your eye catches the sun just right, they'll peck them out. Gave me a fear of birds. Story 81. My uncle, who was my father figure, told me that a monster would come get me if I didn't finish everything on my plate. I ended up having an eating disorder for 20 years. Story 82. God is always watching. They are intense Southern Baptists. All was hellfire and brimstone. I remember taking a bath, getting dressed, or going to the restroom, and feeling so violated. I just wanted to curl into a ball and cry, because some angry old man was waiting and watching for me to screw up so he could send me to hell. It infected every part of my life and made me a paranoid mess until I was in my 20s, when my husband helped me realize how much it had fudged me up. Story 83. Oh Lord, there's a ton of them. My dad once told us that if we ever told anyone about my mother's abuse, that he would lose his pension of 30 years with the city and cause us financial ruin and would be living on the streets. He also told us that if we ever said anything, that they would send us to the local high school where I would be violation every day behind the bleachers. My little brother was already accomplishing that feat with myself and every little girl my mom babysat over the last 13 years, which we never ever spoke about. Sometimes I really wish he wasn't so goddamn dramatic and unhinged with his examples. Really fudge with my gauge on what to take seriously and what to ignore, because he exaggerated so much. Even when I asked him over and over if he was being serious. Took a while to rewire myself to reality and know when he's just being ridiculous for shock value. Story 84. This, we love you all the same. But they only gonna watch me confused if I cry. But when my younger brother cry, my mom would hug defend him. Story 85. In Germany, there is the Struwwelpeter book. Our parents and grandparents read it to us when we were like 4 or 5 and 6. We had the original, uncensored version. The Damenlocher put his thumb in his mouth until he was warned the tailor would come and cut it off. He continued, and the tailor came with a huge scissor and cut it off. That's how my little sister stopped sucking her thumb. The Hans Guck in die Luft always watched the birds in the sky while walking until he fell off a cliff and died. That's how I stopped starting in the sky. I loved to do this as a small kid. Then there was this kid that played with fire and burned itself into a pile of ash. I was terrified of matchsticks until I was maybe 9 or 10. The Soupin Casper denied eating his soup until he died from starvation. That's how my grandma always made me eat up, even if I wasn't hungry anymore. That's how I got fat as a kid, which was then my fault. Lowell, all in all, I give it a 810. Quite effective. This was in the early 90s in post-Soviet Eastern Germany, by the way. Story 86. My dad used to call me his favorite girl. It used to make me feel so special, something I desperately needed. It wasn't until I was about 11 that I found out he said the same thing to my sister. It broke my heart and fostered a sense of competition between my sister and I. Story 87. I was caught practicing kissing for girls with a boy, and my parents told me it wasn't okay to kiss a boy. They didn't say or else, but it hit me like they did. It was what made me first realize that there are actions I can take that will make people leave me behind, alone. It made me terrified of failure, and that transformed into hating myself every time I messed up. Failure is required to learn, and I learned a lot. I disliked myself a lot, so I became very quiet and shy, because the less I spoke, the less chance I would fail. I'm still a very anxious person, and have only recently stopped hating myself, but I still have trouble going back to blaming myself for everything and ruminating. It was my comfort zone for so long that sometimes I have to fight it back, and it gets exhausting. Answer: it's okay to kiss boys as practice for kissing girls. And even just because you want to, you can kiss anyone who consents, and no one gets to define who you are, but you. It's super normal to experiment as a kid, and your parents lay their own fears and repressed crap on you instead of giving you the support you needed. You sound introspective, and I'm sure you're already aware of what I said, but sometimes it helps to hear it from someone outside you. Yank, what happened in your young life with your parents was not your fault. They really messed up. Now you are in charge and you've come a long way. It can take a long time to forge new neural pathways. Mental habits take work to change. I hear how much work you've already done, and I hope you don't give up. If one method or technique doesn't work, try another. You deserve the effort. I'm proud of you. Story 88. Santa was always watching and knew if you were naughty or nice. My parents really played this up, especially around chores or homework. Story 89. My dad swore the car's dome light was illegal while driving, so I'd sit in the dark fumbling for snacks until I got my own license and realized nobody cares. Story 90. That raw cheese would make me sick. I have always been a cheese fiend, but I still feel very guilty when I test some before adding it to whatever dish I'm making. I should talk about this in therapy. Story 91. My brother told me if I swallowed a watermelon seed, a watermelon would grow inside me and my stomach would explode and it'd die. I was very happy when seedless watermelons became a thing. Story 92. Not my parents, but my granddad told me to never eat the bottom part of a banana because that's where spiders grow. I'm 32 and still can eat the bottom part of a banana. Story 93. I wasn't told any white lies that I remember, but my kids are going to be pissed when they learn moms and dads cannot see kids' ears turn red when they lie. My kids both cover their ears, either in obvious ways or more inconspicuous now as the oldest is 10, when they lie so we don't see them turn red. Story 94. You know those small silver balls which were used to decorate cakes? Well, I ate one from a birthday cake. A friend's mom said, you will die in 1 year's time, I cried. I was 7. Story 95. On a hike, my dad once told me if I fell behind, a bear was going to snatch me up and no one in the group would see it happen. I seem to also apply what my dad said to stranger danger. So anytime my family was out, I was always making sure I was in the front where I could be seen. Funny thing was, my parents started getting irritated with me running in front of them all the time and told me to stop. But of course I didn't because I knew they would be sad if I got snatched by some bear or stranger. Story 96. Video games are the work of the devil. DD is satanic, and music is the devil's way into your mind. I snuck my friend's Game Boy home quite a bit and played the shootout of Pokemon Emerald. Since it was the only game I had, I overplayed it, I think. My wife, at the time girlfriend of course, got me an Xbox 360 when I moved out at 17 along with Skyrim and Minecraft. First actual games I could really play. Now I'm obsessed with insanely grindy games, love medieval fantasy, and always have music playing. Not exactly the traumatic abuse that's in this thread, but funny how it worked out. Story 97. That if you're good that Santa will bring you what you want, just meant that only the kids whose parents had money were good. Story 98. My father was busy with work all the time. That's why he couldn't spend more time with me. He also didn't live together with us because he fought a lot with my mother, but they're still together as a couple. Turns out my dad had a wife and 3 children, and I'm a bastard son from an affair between him and my mother that has been going on for 30 years. Took me 18 years to figure it out on my own. It kind of sucked growing up without a proper father figure, but it isn't all that bad. My mother taught me how to be a man, and my brother is my hero. While my father wasn't around all the time, he paid for everything. Our apartment, our bills, my private school, college, my car, our heath care, everything I needed and everything I asked for. Story 99. My dad told me that if you get a tapeworm, they make you get laxatives so strong that you put your intestines. Story 100. When my mom was at work, my dad was supposed to be watching you, but he would leave me alone to go God knows where to do, God knows what. And he told me don't answer the door because it might be the Manson family coming to eliminate me. Story 101. I'm iffy on saying this one because it might stir some shoot, but first let me preface this by, I don't dislike religion. I respect everyone's right to believe in what they want, provided it doesn't infer on others' rights. But when I was like 5, maybe 7, I took the idea of God as literal as you can. I 100 believed at every single moment of my life that a person was looking down my shoulder for every little thing I did. This gave me lifelong Tourette's syndrome and OCD. Let me explain. You can't control your thoughts 247. Believe me, I tried. Every time I had a bad thought, I had to apologize to God. I did this over and over, and I found out real fast that that was not sustainable. I couldn't live like that. So I instead made a compromise in that any time I had a bad thought, I would hum, which was a shortened version of the phrase, everything bad get out of my head. I'm a little fuzzy on why, because this was decades ago, but it eventually led to me only looking people that were good out of my right eye and anyone else out of my left. I was bullied relentlessly, though, out all of schooling because of this, and have 0 friends as an adult, and I'm a complete moron now because I just could not concentrate on anything for years because everything had to be policed through my idea of what God would think is good or bad. My life's an absolute wreck because of it, and I missed out completely on developing any meaningful social skills, so I ended up becoming a reclusive weirdo with 0 friends still into my late 20s. I was only able to get relief by denouncing my faith and accepting I'm going to hell. I am not fudge with any of you on this. Even after all that, I still find myself relapsing, sometimes having a mass seizure of shakes, trying to denounce years of pent-up sins when no one's looking, and I can't even talk to my therapist about this because, well, how do I even ask for help when they themselves are so devoted to their faith? I'm such a mess after losing my faith that can't stomach even potentially giving someone else doubts and putting them in my situation. Had I been an only child and not had my siblings to teach me how to properly behave in public, I'd be dead right now 100 with how much it fudged up my ability to engage with people. I don't blame my father for any of this. The man just wanted someone to always look after me, but the shoot I went through, I'm fine with burning forever. I figure I'll get used to it eventually. Answer. If your therapist is religious, I strongly recommend seeking a non-religious therapist instead, or maybe in addition to your current one. You have religious trauma and deserve someone that can help you with that. If you want to lead an atheistic, agnostic, or just generally less secular life, let me assure you, it is possible and you will be safe. I personally no longer believe in the religion I was raised in, Lutheran Christian, and I have made peace with the idea that there may just be no God, no afterlife. In some ways, it's a massive relief. If you do want to hold on to religion, trust in your God, and know that an almighty being would love you unconditionally and not mind any badness in you, as you are only human. Again, a secular therapist may be more suited to helping you sort these feelings, as they won't be trying to proselytize the way a religious therapist might. My first real psychologist was through a religious charity, and she was so hell-bent on proselytizing me that we never got to work on any of the stuff I was going through at the time. I got a lot better care when I went to a non-secular provider. Story 102. Finding out family secrets can really change how you see things. It explains a lot about why some people act the way they do. Makes you think about how much childhood stuff shapes who we become. Story 103. Not my parents as much as my boomer siblings. College is a waste of time and money. You're just burdening the family by not going out and getting a job right after high school. My parents didn't discourage me from going, but they weren't enthusiastic or supportive about it either. I went anyway. Story 104. First 10 years of my life, Dad kept trying to convince me he was going to sell me to someone as punishment. It came to a head when he held me up over a ledge at the Sioux Locks and yelled, "You guys need a deckhand?" at a passing freighter. This was shortly before Mom and Dad's divorce. Dad still told me the Chinese would force me into slave labor, making shoes. I was terrified of the first Asian man I ever met in public. Now I have a pretty intense alternative taste for Asian women. My head's so gnarly. Story 105. My parents told me there were secret cameras everywhere. In our house, in our neighbors' houses, in school, on the streets. The idea, I guess, was that if we did something wrong, they would know. But my childhood, I was living with the belief that I was always being watched. Surprise, I grew up to have schizophrenia and delusions that I was always being watched and people could see my thoughts. I had absolutely no privacy ever. I have since had treatment and it's under control, but it'd say it messed me up. Story 106. When I was a kid, my dad told me that 2 of his brothers died young, aged 19, 22, in the same car crash. As an adult, I found out that they both died by tragic end, a few years apart, through violent means. I've never heard my extended family mention my uncles' names, share memories, or discuss what they went through as a family. Really fudge up perception of what I can and cannot share with family regarding mental health. Story 107. She found my brother and I under a rock. I asked where we came from. I believed it for a long time as a kid. Story 108. My great-grandma was just on vacation, but she actually died on my sister's birthday, and I never got to go to the funeral or say goodbye. Story 109. That if you swore to do something, you were making a promise to God, so you could never, ever break a swear. I took it super seriously, especially when I had to swear in court, because I was convinced God would physically force me to do whatever I said I would if I didn't do it on my own. I found out later my parents are atheists. They just wanted an easy way to tell if I was lying or not. Story 110. IDK about harmless, but my mom told us that if we touched something in a store, a puppy would die. We didn't touch anything. Story 111. My dad told me when I was 4 that I had an older brother named George, that he had starved and tortured to passing and buried in the backyard. He was trying to be funny. Turns out it was just my dad talking about a nightmare-fueled alcoholic uncle, my grandfather's brother, that often spent time drying out on my grandfather's couch. My dad kept having loud takedown fantasies about this guy, even as a grown-up. Story 112. I used to tell my kids that I had eyes on the back of my head and that magical. I catch them doing little kid things from like 6 to 10 years old. They weren't supposed to do like stay up late playing in each sibling's room or eat stuff that's supposed to be for their lunches only. I'd catch them and they'd ask, "How did you know?" And I'd tell them that moms are magical and I have eyes in the back of my head. Never told them that sound travels in the house. Footsteps, giggles, and chip bag crumbling sounds. Reflective surfaces worked in my favor too. Story 113. Fairly dumb, but when I was 7, I caught my mom making up our Easter baskets. I was already a bit skeptical on the whole Santa Tooth Fairyadic front, so I asked her if the Easter Bunny was real. She had some plausible cover story about how she was helping him, and then my dad and grandma also backed her up, and they were just so sincere about it that I believed them. When I later discovered the truth, it genuinely made me question how I could ever trust my parents again if they were willing to lie so easily. Story 114. When I was 6, my parents called me into the living room to have a serious talk. They then explained that my father wasn't human, but a pig monster from the planet Zoltron in a human disguise. That meant I was half Zoltronian, and on my 16th birthday, 10 years away, the Zoltronians would come and take me to the home planet. I lost it. Complete and total freakout. They told me it was a prank, a joke off Voltron, which I liked. 30 years later, I still have a phobia of space aliens. And you better bet I didn't sleep a wink on my 16th birthday, and for no fun reasons. Story 115. I had to take a really big shoot one day when I was about 910 years old, and I said that out loud, and my dad said, "Don't push too hard, you might break your butt." From that day forward, I was terrified of bleeding out on the toilet while taking a shoot like Elvis Presley. For years, I took the slowest, calmest shoot. I was like a monk on prayer week every time I sat on the throne. Until one day when I was 16, 17, one of my friends was like, "Bro, why were you in the bathroom for 2 hours?" And when I told him I didn't want to break my butt, he gave me the rundown on the bullshit. Darn you, Dad, you funny motherfucker. Story 116. My dad was a sports nut, and when I would need something or be a pestering child, he would point at the football game on the TV and say, "See how it says there's 3 minutes left in the game? I can help you in 3 minutes." Those were the longest 3 minutes of my life at that point. It genuinely screwed up my concept of time for years. Story 117. Adults never lie. Adults are always right. It's been a real trip getting older and finding out about how very wrong and dumb adults can be, myself included. Story 118. This is something I did to my kid when he was around 3-7, and I still feel terrible. I told him that the oil stains in the street were from little kids who didn't hold their mom's hands when crossing the street, didn't look both ways. I was joking, but he is very clever and takes things literally. I only mentioned it a couple times, but he's also overly cautious. Turns out he thought I was telling the truth, which we discovered when we moved to a neighborhood without sidewalks. So we walked on the road along the edge of the street, and when a car would pass by, he'd freak out. Story 119. I loved strawberries as a kid. My mom would tell me that the strawberry police would come get me every time I ate one. Story 120. When my pets died, they went to live in Winter Hut. It was a book we had, and my mom went with it. I literally believe that, as each of my pets disappeared over the years, they were going off to live in a little cottage in the woods together. I was way too old when I realized what it actually meant and ended up grieving every single pet I ever had up until that point, all in one moment. It also made me wonder what other things my parents told me over the years that I believe that was just complete bullshit. Story 121. The demons can enter your body whenever. Took me to exorcisms, and I could not sleep at night because I was afraid it came in me and I'm gonna be possessed. That was traumatic. Story 122. To keep us close, my aunt used to tell us about the man, not a code word for the government, but this shadowy shapeshifter who could be anyone at any time. He would change shape into a stranger and try to lure children away and do gods know what with them. His original form was that of the man typically depicted on neighborhood watch signs. Our local versions of the sign were usually yellow, but she would say that his original eyes were also yellow. Well, fast forward to when me and my cousins and siblings are all around 9 or 10, and we're a little old to worry about supernatural shape-shifting strangers. A kid used to visit from the horse stables across the street, and to pass the time, we used to explore the woods behind my aunt and uncle's house. We managed to get really deep into the woods, and we find a turkey pen with a live turkey in it, just by itself. The kid from the stables opens the pen and lets my cousin's Labrador in. It was like it happened in slow motion, but we watched the dog eliminate this turkey, and suddenly, we get the feeling that we're all being watched. We run back through the woods as fast as we can, panicking, because for the first time ever, these demons about the man have come home to roost. We sincerely believe that what has just happened is that the man has set a trap for us and chased us through the forest back to my aunt's house. The kid from the stables goes home, but the rest of us clamber back inside and tell my aunt that we're being chased by the man. It didn't help when my uncle says to my aunt, "Grab my shotgun." A few months later, it's explained to us that this was a man who lived in a shack in the woods off of one of the nearby main road, and the neighbor kid from the stables had just eliminated a turkey that this guy had been raising. We're never permitted to go that deep into the woods ever again. To this day, I'm unsettled to find signs of human occupation in the woods. Houses, abandoned campsites, shelters, certain trail markers, trash from a homeless person. Story 123. I got my period fairly young, 12 years old, and from the very first it was heavy and irregular, like soaking through a pad in an hour heavy. At 14, my mom took me to her gynecologist, and they put me on what she called low-dose birth control to help manage my period. Low dose is a thing, so I didn't question it. She told me, "Don't think this will protect you from pregnancy because that's not what it's for." Okay, cool. I'm not thinking about intimacy at 14 anyway. Fast forward to 18 and I'm still on the same pill. I lost my virginity and of course flew into a panic, immediately thinking I fudge up. I'm going to get pregnant for sure, despite using protection. My mom found me sobbing and hyperventilating in my room and asked what's wrong, so I told her. She lets out a big sigh, rolls her eyes and goes, "I didn't want to tell you this, but you're on the normal dose of birth control. I just didn't want you to go whoring yourself around with false confidence." Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you'd like to see more content like this, you might be interested to know that I've created another channel with a similar theme, especially for those of you who enjoy what I do. I'll leave a link in the description, and I hope to see you there. Take care.